Well, when last we saw Senator Chris Van Hollen from Maryland, he was at the airport heading to El Salvador because he was going to single-handedly rescue one of his constituents. The problem is the definition of a constituent is an actual voter, and this guy is not, well, a legal voter. He, of course, is Abrego Garcia. He's the MS-13 gang member who was born in El Salvador, came into our country illegally in 2012, was supposed to be deported in 2019, and now he finally did get deported. But Chris Van Hollen, the senator from Maryland, well, as far as he's concerned, he's the most important man in his state. No, the most important American in his state from El Salvador. Well, here's what happened. He went down there, tried to get in to see his guy, and, well, I'll let Chris Van Hollen tell you what happened next.
I've had back-to-back meetings here in El Salvador with our team from the American Embassy, with the Vice President of El Salvador, with human rights groups. And the entire purpose has been to bring Abrego Garcia home because U.S. courts have determined that he was illegally abducted from the United States and now finds himself in the most notorious prison in El Salvador. The Supreme Court, 9-0, has told the Trump administration they must facilitate his return home.
I gotta jump in here because I hate it when politicians lie and there's no one to hold them accountable. I guess that's where we come in. Abducted. It's an amazing word that he used there. He was illegally abducted and then sent to El Salvador. Just so you know, this man was in the country illegally. He's even admitted himself. He has a standing deportation order that is still legal and still valid. The only distinction is because he claimed that his life was threatened if he goes back to El Salvador by a gang that no longer exists, a judge put a temporary hold on that. He was never granted asylum here. He never had a legal right to be here, and he still does not have a legal right to be in America. There was one judge who said, oh, okay, if they send him back, this gang's going to murder him. All right, let's put a hold on the deportation order. That's all it is. Well, that gang doesn't exist anymore. The only mistake, and there is a mistake, they've admitted it, that the Trump administration had here, is that they didn't go in front of a judge one last time and say, hey, that deportation order that you were holding, it's no longer valid. There's no reason why we can't send him home. And the judge would say, like all the other judges before had said, yep, you're right, deport him. And that's been twisted into Chris Van Hollen saying that the courts determined that he was illegally abducted and sent back to his home country. Again, you have the facts on this. Senator Van Hollen does too. He may be a smarmy, despicable, deceitful liberal, but he's not stupid. He's lying to you. He's lying to you for his own political purposes. Just FYI.
Refused to do it. So I called upon the government of El Salvador to do it unless they can provide evidence that he's been involved in MS-13. They said they had no evidence. So this is not about MS-13. I know President Trump wants to make this about gang violence. I have been fighting MS-13 probably longer than Donald Trump even knew about MS-13.
Yeah. So real fast, Chris Van Hollen, we agree on one thing here. Chris Van Hollen definitely does not want to make this about MS-13 because the facts are not on his side. And as a Maryland man who used to live right near Chris Van Hollen in Montgomery County, Maryland, if he's been fighting MS-13 for so many years, he's doing a horrible job. Just go ahead and do any kind of web search you want on MS-13 gang crimes in Montgomery County, Frederick County, and Prince George's County, Maryland. You'll see lots of stories about young ladies being abducted, raped, and then hacked by machetes in Chris Van Hollen's home. I'm sure he would refer to all of those MS-13 gang members as Maryland men. After that deceitful message, he then went on Rachel Maddow, MSNBC, to continue lying.
Is just a gross violation of basic human rights and human decency. And, I asked the vice president if I came back next week, whether or not I could go visit Kilmar. And the answer was no, he couldn't guarantee that. I said, look, I may be the first member of Congress here, the first senator, but I can assure you more will be coming. And you cannot continue to keep this man locked up in this worst prison in El Salvador.
Actually, they can, you see, because he's a Salvadoran. He's a citizen of El Salvador, and the president of El Salvador and the justice system in El Salvador can, in fact, imprison a citizen of El Salvador in an El Salvadoran prison. That's sort of how it works. In fact, the one thing that can't happen in this is that an American politician can compel a foreign leader to release one of his citizens who has been imprisoned in their own country. That doesn't happen, nor should it happen. Imagine if a foreign leader came to our country and demanded that Chris Van Hollen release, somebody who was imprisoned because of January 6th. I don't think Chris Van Hollen would do that. Do you? But again, you notice the language that's being used here. This is human rights issue. This is a due process problem. They're trying to split all of these hairs for you, and they're trying to thread this needle and tell you that this is about some certain higher ideals. But most Americans, I would say all Americans, see the story for exactly what it is. A person was in this country illegally. He was supposed to be deported. He got a quick reprieve from one judge because he lied about facing danger back in El Salvador. Even if he did face that danger, it no longer exists. He is absolutely eligible for deportation immediately. And then there's all of the criminal activity that we've learned even more about with regard to what he's been involved in and the run-ins that he's had with police. We'll unpack that a little bit more coming up in just a moment, but you just heard Chris Van Hollen say that he may be the first congressman, he may be the first Democrat to go down there, but he won't be the last. Yes. Please, Democrats, continue to implode. Please continue to rally around this cause. Follow the lead of Chris Van Hollen and follow the lead of this political genius, Tim Walz, who apparently can't wait to out Van Hollen.
I have come to understand what Donald Trump, what pops into his head and he says, he's going to carry it out. I once again, he talked about the tariffs. He talked about, he's going to deport people. And this whole thing with Mr. Abrego Garcia, it's that old wisdom and terrifying is if you're not speaking up for this man, there will be no one left to speak up for you. Whether it's Chris Krebs that they're going after for simply I know Chris Krebs. He's a Republican. He was there to provide election security in 2020. He did it. And all he said was it was a fair election. They're coming. They're going to do this. So I think the biggest thing is I'm convinced now he's not going to listen to the courts. And I've been saying there is a finer firewall, and it's the people, all the people. And you just had Senator Van Hollen, who there's nobody better. He has to speak up for his constituent because they do plan. If they think they can get away with this, they will press it further.
Constituent votes. This guy is not a constituent, unless they're telling us he has voted, and that would be yet another crime that he's committed, in addition to the other crimes that apparently he's been investigated for and under suspicion for. We'll get to those in a moment. This morning, Elizabeth Warren, not to be outdone by the others, it's like they're all running for president, and this is their platform. Bring back all of the criminal, gang member, illegal aliens to this country. They're the most important people on the planet, in this hemisphere. Have you ever seen this kind of passion from Chris Van Hollen or Tim Walz or from Pocahontas here for you, for your needs, for your concerns, or for the victims of these criminals? It's amazing to me that they don't recognize this, but they're in their bubble. They're in their little echo chamber, and everyone around them is saying, this is right. Trump can't do this. Let's go to it. Let's do it. This is a winner. And it's a winner if you think Kamala Harris was the big champion of the last election. All right, Elizabeth Warren, what do you got to say?
We do not disappear people in the United States, because here's the thing. If they can disappear Mr. Abrego Garcia, then they can disappear you. It's about disappearing people, but it's also about obeying court orders. But now what we've got is truly a man who threatens it, a spineless bunch of Republicans in the House and Senate who help it along. And the American people saying, wait a minute, I think this is the moment we're going to have to start fighting back for our country.
Is that what the American people are saying right now? I don't think that's what the American people are saying right now. I don't even think those are the people in Massachusetts are saying right now. which she represents. It's funny. She's talking about how spineless the Senate is. She's one of the senators. Nothing stopping her from going and giving a speech there, but they're not. They're not doing anything. Chris Van Hollen isn't trying to do anything in Washington, D.C. through his power as a senator. Elizabeth Warren isn't either. They're all doing TV appearances. They're all showing up on cable news studios or using their own selfies to promote social media videos like Chris Van Hollen. So while they're doing all of that, while they're going to the mat for Kilmer, I love that they're calling him by his first name, even though it sounds frighteningly like Kilmore. While they're doing all of that, the Justice Department, just as Chris Van Hollen was landing in El Salvador and being ignored by the local government, the Trump administration and Pam Bondi and the Justice Department released more evidence, more data, more documents regarding Kilmer Abrego Garcia and his activities while he was in this country illegally. The Maryland man in 2019 was apprehended by Prince George's County Police, the gang unit. This is their expertise. This is what they do. As we told you 2 days ago on this program, he was apprehended at a Home Depot wearing clothing that is completely in line with gang paraphernalia for MS-13. And two of the people he was arrested with were MS-13 gang members. The experts in the Prince George's County Police gang unit said that he was a gang member. He had contacts with other gang members. He admitted he was in the country illegally. And this was after an arrest during a murder investigation. So they're investigating a murder, and he becomes one of the suspects, or at least one of the people of interest during the investigation. And I want to emphasize this. As Maryland Senator Chris Van Hollen goes to the mat for this guy, you noticed he said, this isn't about MS-13. He doesn't want it to be about MS-13, because if he denies that this guy is a gang member of MS-13, then he's basically saying, yeah, Maryland police, Prince George's County Police, the people in the gang unit, they don't know what the hell they're talking about. They're wrong. They made a mistake. That's his state. That's his state's police department. But that's what he's saying, isn't he? Robbie Starbuck also found an investigation out of Tennessee. We already knew he was an illegal alien from El Salvador and that Maryland police said he was MS-13. Today, we found out that his wife reported him for beating her. We told you all of that yesterday and showed you the first police report on that. We've got more on the beatings. In fact, it was more than just one episode. We'll get to that in a minute. Now, what about the Tennessee police? They suspected him of human trafficking. Tennessee Highway Patrol caught him in 2022 driving without a license and suspected him of trafficking 7 people inside the vehicle that he was driving. That's your typical day out on a highway. Driving without a license, and you've got 7 people in the vehicle with you. By the way, let's not forget, this is 3 years after he begged on his knees in front of a judge, please don't deport me, because the 18th Street gang back in El Salvador will kill me if you send me back there. I'm just a father. I'm just a good guy. And then he's 4 states away driving without a license with 7 people in the car with him. They called Biden's FBI because when they ran a search on his name, he showed up on the terror watch list. And then the FBI told him to photograph everybody and then let them go. Why? Because that's Christopher Wray and that's Merrick Garland and Joe Biden. That happens today. Instead, you're dealing with Kash Patel, Pam Bondi, and Donald Trump. Democrats are currently demanding that we bring this man back to our country, and the legacy media has been demanding the same. This is who they want in our country. You think that's a good idea? Yeah. There's the Tennessee Star with the story. This is who Chris Van Hollen and Tim Walz and Elizabeth Warren are going to the mat for right now. Meanwhile, Bill Maloogian over at Fox. I told you that we had more information about the domestic battery charges that his wife. So his wife is lying because his wife right now is in front of every camera possible and has set up a GoFundMe account to raise hundreds of thousands of dollars, saying that he's a wonderful man, a good father, took great care of us. He's an innocent man, never did anything wrong. Please bring my husband back. Give me money. Give me money. All right. If that's true, then she was lying when she told the police that she was terrified of him. 2021. She alleges he's a repeat wife beater and said this is in her own words on her own report. At this point, I'm afraid to be close to him. I have multiple photos, videos of how violent he can be and all the bruises he has left me. In her own handwriting, she alleges Abrego Garcia punched and scratched her on her eye, leaving her bleeding after throwing her laptop on the floor. She writes on another day, he got angry again, started yelling and ripped her shirt and shorts off, then grabbed her arm, leaving marks. She also writes that 2 times in 2020, he hit her. In November 2020, he hit me with his work boot. In August 2020, he hit me in the eye, leaving a purple eye. That's her report to the district court in Maryland, Prince George's County, Upper Marlboro. That's her handwriting. That's her signed affidavit. So which time did she lie? This time, or the time that she goes on every television show in front of every camera and begs for hundreds of thousands of dollars in donations because she's the most famous Maryland woman in America? How much more evidence do we need on this case? But this is the mess. So let's just check the scoreboard here. Chris Van Hollen, the governor of Maryland, Wes Moore, who George Clooney said last night is the top candidate for president for the Democrats in the next election. He is also backing this. Jamie Raskin of Maryland is backing this because, you know, he's a Maryland man. You've got Tim Walz. You've got Elizabeth Warren. You've got the leadership of the Democratic Party going to the mat and ready to die on the hill for an MS-13 gang member in the country illegally who I believe lied in court to prevent himself from being deported. And then while he was granted that minor reprieve, he was caught driving without a license with 7 people in the car, was found to be on a terror watch list, was suspected of human trafficking, was questioned in connection with a murder, was arrested with other known gang members, and the gang unit of professionals in Prince George's County also identified him as gang member because of the clothing he was wearing and because of the associations that he was making. And, oh, by the way, he is a repeated wife beater who struck so much fear and left so many marks, bloody, bruised marks on his wife that she went to the police multiple times to file reports. And this is the guy, the good, innocent, loving father Maryland man that the Democrats are spending all of their time and energy on. Have you ever seen them spend that kind of time and energy and emotion for you and for your concerns? Republicans are doing a pretty good job of pointing this out, I have to say, led by, of course, Scott Jennings over at CNN. He had a fun day with this issue yesterday. Let's take a look.
I think there is a line that is crossed with a lot of Americans, especially those key independent voters who may care a lot about immigration, but when they see people being deported from the United States with no due process, when they start to think to themselves, just like the attorney was making online, who's to say that they couldn't throw any of us in an El Salvador prison?
Are you a citizen of El Salvador?
No,
Are you an American citizen? Did you come here illegally?
First of all, President Trump is hinting that we might start sending additional citizens to El Salvador.
This isn't an immigration issue. This is a rule of law issue.
Exactly.
This is about the courts. This isn't about immigration. The border is about immigration. There are many other things that we can talk about that are about immigration. This is actually about the Supreme Court and the courts.
Well, you and I have a difference of opinion, and the Trump administration does not believe the Supreme Court ordered them to do anything to bring him back. Facilitate. And a lot of other people believe that facilitate does not mean go get this guy. And they have said if he can get on a plane and get here, or they let him out of jail, we'll take him back. That's facilitate to them. But that doesn't mean we're going to call out the 7th Cavalry to go ride down to El Salvador and bring him back.
That's right. And actually, he had one other great moment that we want to show you because he's Scott Jennings, after all.
It's going to resonate with people that doesn't feel like they're arguing to bring somebody back from El Salvador who they've now kind of held up as the poster child for our immigration policy. And I don't think that's where Democrats want to be.
They believe, the White House believes, just that they are following the Supreme Court's order here. They think everybody else has got this wrong and that they've got it right on the word facilitate, and the courts cannot compel them on foreign affairs matters. So they actually think they're in the right, and they're willing to fight that out, I guess, as it goes back through the court system. And as long as they are fighting it out, we're going to have days and days of Democrats, I guess, going to El Salvador to try to retrieve this guy, which plays right into their hands.
That's right. This plays right into Trump's. I don't know how Trump does this. He's got like magic dust that makes Democrats defend the indefensible. And not to be outdone, over on CNN, Shermichael Singleton had his moment as well, and he brought it.
I think it is a political issue. I also think it's a national security issue. Prince George's County in 2019, their gang unit determined that Garcia was an MS-13 gang member. His wife in 2021, the wife that's now giving lengthy testimonies about how great he is, said that he's a serial abuser, and she has a ton of photos to showcase said abuse. I agree, due process is absolutely important. We want to maintain that, but I think there's absolutely enough here to send this guy somewhere else. One, he's already broken the law. We've already established that. Now you do have evidence suggesting that he was a member or is a member of MS-13. He's also a serial abuser. This is not the type of individual I don't think any one of us would want in our country. He should be deported.
But respectfully, Sir Michael, we can't make it about Kilmar. Like, that's just one person.
But that's the case we're talking about.
That is, but I guess if we look at the macro and not the micro and just look at the processes, because he's not the only person there. There were they indiscriminately rounded up people and deported them. We also saw in the news this week, maybe it was last week, it's been a long year this week, but the Massachusetts attorney who got the letter saying that you have 7 days to leave the country. This administration has already proven that there are flaws in the system and they are randomly deporting people without due process. That's not specific to him. That should be specific to all of us.
All right, so first of all, somehow they've gotten Democrats to admit that the government up all the time and completely makes mistakes. You're right. Could we talk about the IRS for a minute while you're at it? You've got Democrats saying, well, no, because the problem is the federal government through the Justice Department and through all these different agencies, they trample all over people's due process and they treat them unfairly and they violate their constitutional rights. Oh, great. Okay, fine point. Could we talk about the January 6th cases for a minute? Could we just pause for a minute and talk about January 6th? You see, they only make these arguments when it comes to non-citizens. Forget about non-citizens, people who we know already entered our country illegally, the original sin of their presence in this nation at all. But you can see the narrative changing now. Oh, this isn't about this guy. It's not about MS-13. It's not, because they don't want to talk about this guy anymore. That's all they wanted to talk about 3 days ago when it was Maryland man. Now, it's not about him, and it's not about MS-13. It's not about gangs. It's not about criminals. It's not about wife beating. It's not about suspected murder. It's not about any of that. It's about due process. Because, so many elections in America are won on due process. We need due process. And Trump's like, let's deport the criminals. No, we need to. All right. But you know what? Let's just walk down that path for a quick second together. Due process. You know me, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a constitutional expert, but I know a good lawyer, and I know a really good constitutional expert. It's the same guy, in fact. He's Mark Levin, and he brought up this issue yesterday of due process. Let's see what Mark Levin has to say about it. You're hearing it in the left-wing press. Should I do it in my Mark Levin voice? You're hearing it in the left-wing press. In the Never Trump editorial pages and columns, interviews with former federal prosecutors and more, you cannot and must not deport anyone without some kind of notice and due process. That's the American way. That's compelled by our Constitution. Yet no matter how much I look, I cannot find anything from these people on how this is supposed to actually work. What kind of due process are they talking about? The kind of due process that applies to citizens? If not, then what lower standard suffices as constitutional due process? And who decides? Immigration judges? Federal district judges? I'm not done. Exactly how would due process of any kind be administered to millions and millions of illegal immigrants? We don't have enough courts of any kind in our country to handle the tsunami of cases that would be involved. In other words, our government could never process all these people, meaning a massive number of illegal immigrants would be able to stay here indefinitely. Effectively, this is massive amnesty. And how would we force them to appear in court in the first place? Even now, millions don't show up on their court dates. They just disappear into the population. It's all intentional. The border was open to anyone. In fact, aliens were encouraged to come here. Hundreds of thousands were flown into the country under a bastardized parole process, which was instituted by a Biden executive order in contravention of federal law. This is the Cloward-Piven strategy. Flood the system, overwhelm the system, break the system, and in doing so, achieve your goals. Anytime you hear them talk about due process, they just leave it at that. And I would love for one of these anchors, one of these teleprompter readers with fabulous haircuts, to just lean in and say, could you describe exactly what due process you're talking about? Explain to me what the due process is for a foreign national a citizen of a foreign government under the jurisdiction of that government who is no longer even in this country, but when he was in this country, he was here illegally, and 2 judges said he should be deported. He is now in the country of his origin, in the jurisdiction of that nation that he belongs to. Now, to explain the due process involved of how a president or an administration or a U.S. court can or should do anything. And I would love to hear that answer.